So we're about to jump into the interview portion of the Just Japan podcast, where I interview Mistugi and Chiaki, who are co-hosts of the Anime Addicts Anonymous Podcast. And this is a podcast that's been around for quite a long time. It's been around for 6 years, which is not so common these days. You know, most podcasts kind of fizzle out when people realize how much work it takes to put one together and to maintain it. But their podcast has been around for quite a while. It's an audio podcast, but as well as they have a YouTube presence as well. So they record a lot of their live shows, and definitely very cool. You know what? So anyone out there with an interest in anime, Japanese animation, you're really going to enjoy this. And even to be honest, if it's a topic that you don't have a lot of interest in, sit back. You're going to definitely learn some interesting things. You're going to walk away from this interview saying, hey, well, okay, that's pretty cool. I never thought about that, or maybe I should check this out. These two folks really know their stuff. They're very passionate about the topic, and they make it very accessible to folks like me who don't know anything about the topic. So sit back and listen to my interview with Mistugi and Chiaki, the co-hosts of the Anime Addicts Anonymous Podcast. Okay, so Just Japan podcast listeners, welcome to episode number 59 of the Just Japan podcast, Anime Addicts Anonymous Podcast. And this evening I've got two guests who've taken the time to stop by and share a lot about the world of anime with all of us. So thank you, Chiaki and Mistugi, for joining us tonight.
Hey Kevin, I'm glad to be here, and thanks for taking the time to have us on your show.
Always great to talk to someone who's out in Japan.
Oh, well, I'm so happy to have you guys. And yeah, so here we are. And I'm saying this evening or tonight because that's where when I'm doing the interview here. So I go from that perspective. My brain will start, getting mixed up if I talk about, morning there and evening here. But
same way.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah, it's 9 a.m. here, so you're in the future.
I am in the future, 13 hours ahead. Yes, and it's looking pretty good, guys. It's looking pretty good.
Awesome.
So, could you tell the Just Japan podcast listeners a little bit about the Anime Addicts Anonymous podcast and how long you've been doing it and why you decided to start the podcast?
Well, you're kind of lucky. You have both of the founders with you today. So we're kind of the original, and we started back in 2009 and have been doing it fairly weekly since, minus a week or two for Christmas or something, because we're selfish and take those days off.
Oh my gosh, how could you do that?
I know, seriously. Yeah, doing a podcast is really, really awesome, and oftentimes a really rewarding thing, especially when you hear from people who listen, and you get great feedback from them. And 300 episodes later,
we're rich and famous.
Yeah, we're super rich and famous.
That's podcasting is the key to becoming the next Bill Gates.
That was the goal, because the
and everything we're saying is dripping with sarcasm right
because
now.
the anime world is a world that is plush with potential listeners. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's even operating inside a niche like anime, you find that it's super rewarding. And if anybody wants to check us out, our website's www.aaapodcast.com. So we're always trying to.
And you can find us by AAA Podcast or Anime Addicts Anonymous Podcast.
That's right. If you just, I've been reading a bit about you guys over the last few days, and you type in Anime Addicts and things just start popping up all over the place for you.
Things
guys.
start popping up. That's interesting.
So, Kevin, I heard that you had some listeners of your own that were clamoring for anime content.
That's absolutely right. That's right. People have been asking me over the year and change I've been doing the show to do an episode about anime. And to be honest, it's one of the things where, the reason why I bring different people on every week with this podcast is because my scope of Japan is quite limited, and I don't want to basically BS my way around a topic. So, there's no point in me trying to talk to my guests about anime because I honestly don't know anything about anime.
And you live in Japan. How dare you?
How dare I? I know. How dare I break the stereotype?
Okay, well then one of my goals today is to get you to watch some anime after this interview.
Make you an anime addict. That's
absolutely
the podcast mission.
I've got nothing against anime. It's just something I've never watched. I mean, aside from Totoro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really the only. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I've sat in my living room, confused, watching Japanese TV with my wife and family while there are various animes on. Now, okay. Now, here's a question. Now, and don't. This is where I will glean my ignorance will shine through. I assume a show something like Yokai Watch would be just considered a Japanese cartoon. You would not call that anime, would you?
You know, what is anime and what is not anime is a subject that's heavily debated.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject right there.
Because you have things like Yokai Watch,
which my son loves.
Yeah, that was all the rage when we were out in Japan.
I'm pretty sure it is still all the rage.
Oh yes, oh god, it's only getting hotter and hotter.
Bye bye Pokemon. Hello Yokai.
Poke who?
Yeah,
exactly.
But you have stuff like that where you can have an argument be made of, oh, this is more of a Japanese cartoon than an anime, and other people who will say, no, anime is animation from Japan, end of story, period, exclamation point.
Okay.
And so they'll loop it in. And then on the other side, you'll have people saying anime is a style. And then that gets into the whole debate of Avatar, Legend of Korra, those kinds of shows produced by American companies, made in South Korea, I believe those were made in, and they have the anime style. So are they anime? If they feel like anime, if they kind of look like anime, does that make them anime? So what is anime is almost its own philosophical debate.
Yeah, Kevin, I think the most common answer you'll get over here is that anime is animation that's done in Japan.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, Yokai Watch is anime.
Okay.
To most people.
Okay, so anime. If we very simplistically speaking, animation from Japan, quote unquote, could be anime. Would you say that a lot of the quote unquote more hardcore anime fans would agree with that, or would that be? I mean, you've already said that's a point of contention.
I think so.
I think it'd be like vehemently. They would vehemently argue that
bloody hell no.
Yes, there's no other possible answer. It has to be from Japan.
Yes,
like basically like Batman the cartoon that you'd see in America or in the West. That is not anime.
Because even using that as an example, there was a while back where Marvel partnered with Studio Madhouse, which is a very famous anime production house, and Madhouse created Iron Man the anime, X-Men the anime, and Wolverine the anime, and those are American properties. They're American superheroes, and they had a little bit of a different style compared to what you would expect to the normal anime style. But I think far and away by fans, they weren't cartoons, and they weren't anything else but anime because they were produced in Japan.
Yeah, it's like you have X-Men from the 90s cartoon in America, not anime. But X-Men made in Japan 15 years later, oh yeah, that's anime.
Okay, I guess, I mean, that I suppose now, okay, I'll jump in with a little bit of something that confused me recently. You're familiar with the Teen Titans?
Yes.
So a couple of years back, a student gave me I've been living in Asia since 2002. I'm in a bit of a bubble, in a way. Not necessarily a bad way, but I'm in a bubble. So I'm not always up on what's happening in America and Canada, like kind of Western culture. So I don't have much time to consume a lot of content because I spend most of my free time creating content, like podcasting. I do a lot of YouTube stuff over the years. But yeah, so a student gave me this like double box set of Teen Titans, and I just like literally threw it in my shelf, and it was there. And then I had a child, and he's grown bigger, and he's 4.5, pushing 5 now, and he saw it one day, and I've never watched Teen Titans, and he was like, "Daddy, what's that?" I'm like, "Oh, it's Teen Titans. I mean, let's throw it in and start watching." And we watched a few episodes, and it was like, okay. I'm like, it's kind of a bit dark for a kid who's a bit over 4, but all right. But then we were watching one episode, and all of a sudden the theme song was in Japanese. They were singing like Nihongo. And it was kind of like this kind of, I was like, what? He was looking at me like, "Dad, what's going on here? I'm confused. What's happening? Are they like?" And I was just trying to think of myself, like, were they trying to do this kind of like anime twist on Teen Titans? Like sometimes the theme song was in Japanese, kind of a strange Nihongo, and I don't know, kind of.
Yeah. It says here that I don't know a lot about Teen Titans because most anime fans would not consider Teen Titans to be anime.
Mm.
But I'm just looking here, and while the country of origin is the United States, the theme song is performed by Puffy Amiyumi.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the thing to say about Teen Titans, and you have it up, Mitsugi. When was the release for Teen Titans? The original release?
2003.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I want to say I remember watching Teen Titans when it was on TV, and it is a good show. I would agree with you. A little dark for pushing 5, but.
Yeah.
But still a good show.
Yeah, yeah, it is a cool show. It's just like I was like, and then I've got a daughter who's like 2. When she come walking in the room, like staring at it too, I'm like, Kai, could we maybe turn this off until your sister's not around? Yeah.
But I think it was I would say it was in part one of those decisions where 2002 you had the anime of the 90s that really put anime on the map, especially here in the States, because that was the heyday when you had Dragon Ball Z, you had Sailor Moon, you had Cowboy Bebop. All of these were running on TV, and a lot of anime fans who are now our age, who are in their 20s type of thing, have the late 90s, early 2000s as like this golden year for them in anime, when anime was a lot more commonplace in the States. Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, you can name a ton that were over here. And I would guess, without looking this up, but guess that it on behalf of the American studios saying, this is really popular and we want to kind of brand it with that same kind of look and feel as all these other anime shows that are really big right now.
Let's ride the wave and make some okane.
Make
some money.
I think it's the same in Japan, right? You have a lot of Japanese pop family have English words injected into them.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Where you have
the same reverse.
A pop song with not just Japan, but in Korea as well. I mean, I think a lot through Asia, where you have English is cool, it's kakui, so you've got like some English lines in the chorus or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. And I would say this was the same. Anime for the target demographic that the show was trying to reach at the time, anime resonated really well. And again, without actually researching it, that's my guess.
Cool. Well, okay. So I'm curious. I mean, in your so you've talked about like there being a debate about what may be anime, what may not. In your mind, for both of you as anime fans, what do you consider anime?
I consider anime. I fall under the definition of, I'm a little split. I'm like 75% anime is animation produced in Japan.
Okay.
But then I kind of have a sub, maybe even more than 75%. But then I kind of temper that with it is still a bit of a stylistic choice on behalf of the creators, and that has changed over time. The definition of what that stylistic choices look like have differed as with any medium. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking of a really good example that I recommend to anyone to watch it. It won an Oscar for a short film a couple years ago. Is an animation called La Maison des Petites Cubes, and my French is awful, so please excuse that. But it was an animation produced in Japan. That was produced in Japan, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that, by the strictest definition of anime is animation produced in Japan, means that that's anime. But if you look up pictures of this animation, La Maison des Petites Cubes, it doesn't look or feel like anime at all. And that's not a bad thing. It's just at a glance, no one would think it was from Japan specifically. So I say I'll raise it up to like 85% anime is animation produced in Japan, but with that little caveat of like a 15% of it still kind of has to maintain a certain look and feel.
Okay.
Yeah. I subscribe to I'm in the camp that anime is animation from Japan. I know that if you were to write out the katakana for animation, it begins with anime. So I know that Japanese people don't really have the same kind of weird prejudice.
Yeah.
And I know that it's really petty and stupid, and that people should just call everything that's animated anime. But I think it's just a nice way to keep the two straight, because anime that comes out of Japan and anime that comes out of the West is not the same type of stuff. So
absolutely not. No, very different. Very, very different. Okay, well, I'm curious. How did you guys become interested in anime? What first kind of got you excited about it? Was there like a one moment? Was there one particular show or movie that got you interested in it when you were younger?
Well, for me, the first anime that I ever saw was My Neighbor Totoro,
Ah,
which is probably the most famous. I think Mickey Mouse actually has surpassed Totoro in Japan, which kind of makes me sad. That's kind of the impression I got.
no,
But
I really think you're right. Actually, to be honest, like my daughter, who is now not quite 2, she sees we've got some Totoro dolls around the house and
yeah,
plush toys, and she sees Mickey Mouse anywhere, and she's like, Mickey,
yeah,
Mickey. She
total
sees
dominant.
Totoro and no idea.
Oh,
Oh,
I
well,
know. Well, not yet, because I've
yeah.
seen My Neighbor Totoro, and that is a really nice movie. I like it.
The boring answer, yeah, I like it too. The boring answer to this question is that I started watching Dragon Ball Z on Toonami like everybody else.
yep.
Okay.
But when I got to college, I was just like this lowly freshman slime, just like a lot of freshmen, and
Yeah, we
and the
tend to be that way.
president of the anime club was a senior, and he was kind of a dick. So
You know,
so
that's really funny. I heard the same thing about you when I was a lowly freshman
yeah,
slime.
yeah,
Yeah, everyone was like the president of the anime
you
club's a real
better
dick.
you better watch it, Chiaki. So the president of the anime club was taking total advantage of me, and he gave me a gigantic box of anime VHS tapes that were all old stuff, and he said, "Here, convert this all into DVD." And there were like 100 VHS tapes, but he knew that I had the ability to do that, so I did it. But as
It's
I
still
did,
not nice, though, right? It's still not nice to
no,
do that to somebody.
it's slave labor.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
it's despicable.
What else do you use freshmen for?
Put VHS on DVD. Oh my god.
Little does he know that I was using him, because as I was converting all of these VHS tapes to DVD, I was watching all the VHS tapes that he gave me, which included older stuff that are classics like Record of Lodos Wars, Most Dangerous Geist, Bubblegum Crisis. There were some Macross tapes in there and some other stuff that, if you list those names to current anime fans, they're like, what the hell is all that? I have no idea what those anime are, because they're all from, the 90s and 80s. So I think that's kind of when my fandom kind of exploded, because I had suddenly had a huge exposure.
You know, similarly, I too was the Dragon Ball Z Sailor Moon. I could guarantee that a member of my family was recording Dragon Ball Z at like 4:30 whenever it came on, if I wasn't home from school in time.
That's cute.
And if I got home, if something kept me late at school and I couldn't watch my Dragon Ball Z, and someone knew that, and someone had a VHS tape ready for me with it on it.
The days before TiVo.
I know. We're so old.
You poor child.
And then I look back, and at the time it was normal, but the older I get and the more I talk about it, the more I realize this store that opened up not far from my house was really kind of a magical, transformative place for me. And it was an anime, but they set themselves up. They weren't like a figure shop or something. They really focused. They had some wall scrolls, and they had some figures, and they had some bags, of course, but they really focused on selling VHS tapes. Say VHS tapes because DVDs weren't around at the time. And they had a wall that was for sale, and then they had a wall that was for rent, and you could become a member and you could rent VHS tapes. And I would just go in there on a weekend, on a Friday on the way home from school. My mom would take me in, and I would just pick stuff out that looked cool. And of course, I watched a lot of shit that way that really was not appropriate for me to watch. I grabbed Ninja Scroll one time. That was how I watched.
Your mom should not be renting you Ninja Scroll. That's not good.
I watched Vampire Hunter D another time with nudity included.
Is that why you're so messed up?
It explains a lot, right?
I got it.
But it was a really cool place, and not only did I see a lot of anime, but they also had kind of in the back section, they had a viewing area where they just welcomed anybody who wanted to take something off their wall and pop it in the VHS and hang out and meet other people who liked anime. And my friends and I would go in there, and we do that sometimes. And it was a really nice place that was kind of this space, judgment-free zone, whatever you want to call it. And I saw a lot of anime that way, and it just didn't stop.
Kevin, can I give you a parental tip?
Sure.
never show your children Ninja Scroll. That's probably a good idea.
Now, I've never seen Ninja Scroll, but to be honest, earlier this week, I was re-listening to an episode of the G Pod with Anthony Joe, where you guys are on. He interviewed you guys last year.
Yeah.
And he was talking about Ninja Scroll, and I heard you guys talking about Ninja Scroll, and I've never seen Ninja Scroll, but it sounds like it's something, no parent should let their child see.
It's violent in a way that people who have not seen anime have never seen before. Like, there's nothing I could show you in Western media that would match the violence level of Ninja Scroll.
Wow.
I don't think you could rate it. It would definitely be NC-17.
Well, that's like one of the things, like when you hear things I hear since I've been here, like, people who talk about, like, on YouTube or on some forums, and they're joking about, or maybe they're not joking even, they talk about, like, anime. There are such dark areas of anime, with, like, things like rape and horrible stuff. I guess there's subcultures, right?
Yes.
Well, I look at it, I try to explain this to people, and it seems so obvious to me, but I didn't realize how obvious it wasn't until I really started talking to people about anime and kind of being in a position to explain it, where anime in the States, and cartoons and animated features are something that's been produced primarily for kids until you had kind of The Simpsons started making way for things like South Park and Family Guy, started opening the doors for things geared to adults and adult humor. But even then, it's kind of humor. So animation is to entertain or for children or some combination, thereof. And if it's for adults, it's entertaining, and it's really rarely serious. But anime in Japan never had that kind of stigma. And so you'll find anime that covers every topic. It's kind of like asking, well, what movies are out there? Well, everything. There's literally everything out there. If you want a movie about My Little Pony, you can find it. And if you want a movie about someone having their mouth stitched to another person's, but you can find that too. Like, literally, there is no holds bar, because it's just whatever can come. The Human Centipede. Mitsuki's looking at me like I'm crazy. That's a real movie, and it's effed up. But that's my point. Is that
what is the rating of this podcast? This is a clean podcast.
Well, it is a clean podcast, but don't worry. No one has actually been saying anything that's we haven't been saying anything really explicit yet. We're letting imaginations run wild. That's okay.
It is a movie. I refrain from going into more detail than that. If someone wants to look it up, do so at your own risk.
I suppose when I think about it now, like when you walk into any konbini, for those of you guys out there, that's a convenience store in Japan. I mean, there's a huge rack of manga, which are comic books, and they're not geared to children. They're for adults. Yeah. And you walk in any convenience store at any time of day, especially around rush hour and whatnot, there's going to be just a wall of adult men normally standing there just reading comic books. Yeah. And it's right beside the porno magazine section, and I know that a lot of those comic books are pornographic comic books, and there's just people just stand there unabashedly, quite normally reading them.
Well, Kevin, I have many a fond memory standing in konbini, buying various One Piece candies. But no, seriously, wow. I do know what you're talking about. There's the adult content that you see in manga in convenience stores in Japan is probably a little shocking to a Western person. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But as far as anime goes, I think we've sort of transitioned away from the intensely violent stuff. Like, there have been some shows recently that in the last 6 months that, namely Tokyo Ghoul is one of them, and the other one that I'm thinking of as Terraformers. It got really heavily censored on Japanese television, really heavily censored. Okay. And I think it's because we've sort of transitioned away from intense violence in anime in the last 10 years or so. If you go back, most of the really horrific violent stuff, including Ninja Scroll, is contained to the 80s and the early 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can find some really grotesque hentai content that has a lot of excessive violence even right now. But in terms of actual stuff you might see on Japanese television, I think that time is past.
Well,
mostly.
I mean, you just say the term hentai, which essentially means pervert in Japanese. I mean, that's very subculture.
Yeah.
Dark subculture. But I mean, that alone is a word that doesn't have a very nice kind of fuzzy vibe around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's really, anything. You can find anything in any other medium. You can find it in anime. Whether it should be there or not is a completely different debate, but you can find it as an art form. You can find people expressing all kinds of things.
Well, I suppose it's kind of like podcasting in a way. I mean, as far as podcasting goes, I mean, there is literally a podcast for anything out there. I mean, how many people are listening to it? Who knows? But there's literally, I'm assuming, a podcast for everything out there.
Yeah.
Because people are able to produce them on their own, and do what they want. Wow. Okay. Well. Okay. So I'm curious. Okay. So, by the way, I just had a epiphany. I think maybe I'm 39 years old. I'm such an old fogey that I'm starting to forget things. But as a young child, I remember I have an older brother, and he was really into this show, and I just remembered I have seen a lot of anime as a young child. Robotech, the Macross Saga.
Robotech. Okay.
I've seen every episode of Robotech War, the Macross Saga. I think I'm just looking now. There was like how many? There was like 36 episodes. I've seen them all because my brother loved that show, and he had not just he watched them all continuously, and he had them on VHS, but he had the books too. He would read. I didn't read them, but he read them. But I do remember watching, guys in giant robot suits fighting monster aliens.
Yeah, I mean it's surprising to people.
That's 80s. That's like mid 80s. I remember.
Well, you had all the way back into what was it, 60s or 70s? Kimba the White Lion that got localized in the States. Osamu Tezuka. I mean, you've had anime popping up here and there in the West for a long time. It's just a matter of kind of, as you said, that epiphany moment when someone goes, "Oh yeah, I have watched something."
Yeah,
like
wait a second, you're right. That wasn't.
So Robotech, we just discussed something somewhat related to Robotech on our last podcast episode, which was episode 269. I think that was titled "Great Old Anime That You Probably Haven't Seen," because most newer anime fans really don't go past like the last 10 years, and there's a lot of stuff from the early 90s and even the 80s that people have never even heard of. Robotech came up in that discussion because Robotech actually is an anime that gives people a sour taste in their mouth. Some people, because Robotech is actually a story that's adapted from the content of 3 different anime.
Oh, really? Okay.
So they took the Super Dimension Fortress Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry, Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber, and they kind of combined them into this weird, I don't want to call it a monstrosity because I think the plot line sort of worked, but most people would tell you just go watch Super Dimension Fortress Macross. I've seen some of Robotech. I think there's nothing wrong with watching Robotech, but some people will, the more intensely hardcore people will go into an instant tirade.
Okay.
At the mention of Robotech. But hey, anything that gets mecha anime into the United States sphere at all, I'm okay with that because we need more mecha in the United States.
Yeah, mecha's really died off. Mecha was like a thing of the 80s, and then it just really hasn't. You'll still get pockets like the long running shows, Macross, Gundam, things like that. Yeah, they're just mega giants. But other than that, we haven't really had kind of a point in time where every other show was super robot, giant robot, something like that.
Well, I mean, hey, in my case, it was like me and my big brother living in a rural fishing village in eastern Nova Scotia, Canada in the 80s, watching giant robots from Japan.
That's awesome.
I mean, space, wherever they were, running around, stomping on things and fighting bad guys. So, I mean, I guess when you look at it that way, it was, I don't now, and then when I think about it too, we only had 3 TV channels at that point. And I'm not joking. This is like, welcome to like early 80s or mid 80s Canada. We had, our public broadcaster, CBC. We had 1 private broadcaster and a French channel. And we didn't speak French, so that was
really
basically we had 2.
Well, Kevin, I grew up in West Virginia, and we barely have running water. And that's today.
That is not true.
That was just last week.
I'm kidding, but like back when I was a kid, in 1998, I mean, we were still using like 3 kilobytes per second dial-up internet. It's pretty brutal.
Talking about these anime that got us into it, and talking about things like Giant Robot, Super Robot, and the fact of, like I said before, you can find almost anything made into anime. I think that's one of the reasons why it draws a lot of people to it. I realize this is kind of on a tangent, but I think that's one of the appeals of anime, is that anime, unlike a lot of other mediums, is a blank page, quite literally. An artist sits down and there's nothing stopping that artist from drawing anything they want. It's not like a lot of other shows. I mean, yeah, it's still governed by budget and how much time they have, and the quality of artists they can hire, and things like that. But it's not like other TV shows, where if a TV show in the States says we want to do a super robot show, you're looking at millions and millions of dollars of budget. Whereas in anime, if you take, $100,000 or $500,000 or however much you're going to spend on a show and however long it's going to run, you can make that. Just determines the quality of it. But the artists can make it anything they want. It's not like here in the States, where the budget is going to determine kind of what type of show it is, where, we have this budget, so we got to do a hospital drama because that's all we can afford. And I think it's a really interesting medium because of that, because there are no rules.
Nice. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, in Hollywood, you have budgets, and these days, of the movies that are, for the most part, aside from some sleepers that maybe kind of catch on here and there, I mean, for the most part, all the big budget movies, I mean, the big budget is, it's tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And it is like I said, it is similar in anime, where you can look at a high budget anime and a low budget anime, and you'll tell the difference in the music and the animation and the style and quality. But that doesn't mean that they could still both be super robot anime. It's just one of them is a prettier looking super robot anime.
Okay, well, lots to talk about anime, because that's what we're here to talk about. Now, I'm curious, for those out there who are listening, and there are a growing number of you, so thank you, all of you guys who are listening, who may be like me and are a little in the dark about anime. What are some suggestions you might have for some people who are interested in exploring anime? They want to dip their toes into the water. What would you say are some good beginning, I don't know, quote unquote, beginner TV shows, movies for people who want to start watching anime?
Well, I want to say, first of all, that I don't really believe in the term beginner for anime viewing. Like, I know that there's some anime that's pretty intense, and maybe you don't want to start off watching that. If you're introducing your best friend to anime for the first time, you wouldn't want to freak them out with Ninja Scroll.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean,
or maybe you do.
Maybe you do, but
depending on who they are.
Yeah, maybe your friend's a sicko, but most anime isn't like that. So what I've done here is I've put together a list of stuff that I think a lot of people would not consider quote unquote beginner anime, but I don't really believe in that term.
Okay.
So I've kind of divided them up by genre, so people who like specific genres can find at least one show that I think all of these are really excellent.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
awesome.
like I was just saying, it's a medium, and basically think of what you want to watch, and then there's a good show in that genre. So
okay.
I think any of the Ghibli movies, the Studio
Yeah.
Ghibli films, are really amazing.
And those are, I want to say, if you have some beginner, maybe it is Ghibli, but that's only because the topics vary so widely. You have everything from comedy to drama, and they're always well produced.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's spelled Ghibli for people who have no who may struggle with the spelling. But if you like action anime, there's a lot of great stuff. These are more for adults.
Mm-hmm.
If you want action that's for children, you should probably look at the shonen genre. So there's like Dragon Ball, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter. But for adults, I like to recommend Black Lagoon.
Okay.
It's an anime that's about, I guess they're kind of like pirates, but they're not pirates like on a pirate ship. They're sort of like smugglers, And there's a lot of intense action in Black Lagoon, and it takes place in like a futuristic version of Singapore, I think.
Okay.
I showed Berserk to a friend the other night. Berserk's a little more violent, but it's very dark, set in a more medieval setting. So Berserk is really excellent. For comedy, I recommend Azumanga Daioh is really good. And if you like more of like a perverted comedy, I think Golden Boy is probably the best.
Golden Boy is kind of like the Family Guy of anime.
Everyone loves it.
Okay.
I've never showed Golden Boy to like a college age student or a kind of 20s or older even, and not had them get a laugh out of it. But that being said, I also showed it to people who I know weren't super conservative or would have issues with some of the stuff.
Okay.
I have a couple more here. For drama, one of my personal favorite shows is Great Teacher Onizuka. That was a really popular manga in Japan. It's about an ex-Yakuza gang member who becomes a high school teacher and helps to they actually put him in middle school, but he helps to sort of straighten out his students.
Oh, okay.
One by one. And
okay.
And Ghost in the Shell is really excellent for sci-fi. That's a classic. There's a new Ghost in the Shell anime coming out in the spring of this year called Ghost in the Shell Arise. And that series has been going on forever. So if you watch the original Ghost in the Shell movie from whatever year that was in, like 96 or something, that could be totally wrong. I'm not really sure. But there's plenty of content there. And fantasy is a genre that's pretty much dead. But if you want to go back and watch some good fantasy, I recommend The 12 Kingdoms and Record of Lodoss Wars. So that's a long list for you there.
Nice. Well, thank you. That's some. I mean, to be honest, these are some things I've actually heard of. Of course, I've heard of Ghost in the Shell many times.
Yeah.
Even as far as the Ghibli movies go, I've heard of so many, and they've been around me all the time, and I haven't like Ponyo. Ponyo, is that it?
Yeah, Ponyo.
Yep. I remember when that song was like the rage. It was like my first or second year here in Japan. Never saw the movie. I don't know.
It's good.
Yeah. Now, okay, so, obviously, if you're here in Japan like I am, and I know that actually, I think something like 15% of the listeners of the podcast are here in Japan. We can, if we so choose. Apparently, I haven't made the choice to access anime or manga at any point if we want to. For those who are not in Japan, folks who are in the States like you guys are, they're in Canada, they're Australia. Where are some good places they can go, maybe, or places online that you might suggest where they can get their hands on or watch some good anime?
Crunchyroll is a great one. And that's a service that's been rolled out internationally to many countries. A lot of these streaming services, you'll have issues of region and things like that.
Okay.
And this service isn't available in your region. And
tell me about a geo. Yes, what do they call it? Geotagging? No, geo. Whatever, I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah.
You're not in America. You can't watch this video. You suck. Yeah.
Exactly. So Crunchyroll is a good one because I remember reading a bunch where they've gotten in a ton of countries around the world.
Is that an app, or is that like a streaming web service? How does that?
It's a streaming web service. They do simulcasts, and basically there's a free version where you can watch it with ads, and I think it's up to 480 or 720. And then there's a paid service, and it's the usual amount, like $7 a month or so, where you can get episodes that basically within 24 hours of them airing in Japan. So you get them sooner than the free service. You also have no ads and can watch it in up to 1080p. And the other good thing about the paid service is then you can access it through any of their apps. And I know they're on PS3. I think they're on PS4.
You can get them on iPhone.
You can get them on iPhone, Android. And I want to say they're on Xbox One, but I don't have an Xbox One, so don't quote me on that. But Crunchyroll is kind of the service because they went out there and they said, we're going to be the Netflix of anime. We're not going to have a bunch of other stuff. We're going to be the Netflix of anime. And the only thing with Crunchyroll is that the way that they work is because they're licensing recent shows, many times, not all the time, but many times, once the show has finished airing in Japan and a North American or a licensing company has picked it up for distribution rights, it'll then be removed off of Crunchyroll. So
Okay.
not all the time. Sometimes Crunchyroll and the other company will work out a deal, or it's not picked up, or whatever the case may be. But Crunchyroll is a really great resource for oftentimes newer, currently airing anime. Hulu Plus has also really started stepping up. Hulu, and of course Hulu Plus being the paid version, has started really stepping up their anime game.
Okay.
And Hulu Plus, I found being a little bit bigger than Crunchyroll, they can kind of hang on to shows a bit more. One of the ones that we're watching right now for the podcast that we should have watched forever ago, and it's kind of a little bit of a retro review at this point, is Steins Gate. And that's really big in the anime community, but it wasn't on Crunchyroll anymore because that show within the past 5 or so years. I forget the exact date, but
I think it's like 2010 or 2011.
Yeah, I think it's about 5 years or so. And it's not on Crunchyroll anymore because it's been licensed by Funimation, but Hulu Plus, being a lot larger of a company and having a lot more deals with networks and companies, still has it through Funimation, and they even have some of the dub that has been released up there. So Hulu Plus is a good one. Crunchyroll is also a good one. Netflix sometimes gets anime, like Knights of Sidonia, which was 2 seasons ago, was a Netflix exclusive anime.
Okay.
But they're kind of on the fringe. And one thing that I'm just gonna kind of give a shout out to, and you can edit this later if you want.
Oh my god.
It's not that
what
bad.
What are you gonna say? I'm bracing myself.
When we were in Japan, there are things called virtual private servers and virtual networks that can make your router look as though it's in a different country.
I won't. I've talked about this before. We'll leave that in. VPNs, baby.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know because it's not entirely like.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm sure the FBI is not listening to this podcast, you know, or whatever. The NSA, who cares? No, the Motion Picture Association of America, whatever. Yeah, VPN clients, yes, good to mask your computer, so you don't know where, so they don't know where it is.
Exactly. I had a free one that worked just on my computer, and that was how I got to Crunchyroll and Netflix and stuff when I was in Japan. Yeah. But though I think Crunchyroll is now in Japan, I think I saw that Netflix is there or coming. So that this may be a moot
Netflix
point.
is apparently coming this fall.
Okay, yeah. But I don't know if the quantity is going to differ or not.
Well,
I
know that's like with, for example, Hulu. I mean, I don't have it myself. I should just get off my butt and even just get a 2-week free trial because they do that here.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends, you know, from America, from Canada, who've gotten the Hulu, the Hulu.jp, say it's not nearly as good as. I mean, there's just a very little. There's not so much English content, and if there is, it's like older content.
Yeah, and it's limited. So I just got to give a shout out to VPNs and look into stuff like that.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, a lot of the people out there who are listening, you know, are people who are planning on coming to Japan. They want to come here. They want to get here. So to think about that, I know, like, for example, I'm a Mac guy. VPN clients aren't always the easiest to use, from what I gather. But I know, like, for example, if you use Google, Chrome, you're all set. So just make sure you're using Chrome on your device.
And our friends in Japan had one that you actually, if you're a little more tech savvy, went into your router settings and put some other name server stuff in their router settings, and then any computer hooked up to the network in their house looked like it was in the States. Ooh. So I think that was a paid subscription. I want to say they paid like $5 a month for it.
A few people I know who they say just for the sake of making it that much cleaner and nicer, will use a paid service. And I mean, I don't know why I'm doing that. Why am I not doing that?
Come to the new age of streaming.
Yeah, I'm a podcaster. I know a thing and a half about technology, maybe, but I should. Yes. So VPN clients, way to go, guys. You should. For those of you out there who are thinking of coming here, it's a solution.
I always figure it's better to, even if I'm VPNing, it's better to at least pay for the content, and that way I'm helping the system, even if I'm gaming the system a little bit.
And if you want to go to Japan, you should do it right now because the exchange rate is more favorable now than it has been in like 12 years. So you can have yourself a fun vacation for a very reduced price.
I've been looking at flights every day. I think
that is if you're an American. If you're a Canadian, our dollar's in the toilet. So
is it?
Well, I mean, it's good for me being here. But yeah, it is. It's all about oil.
Uh,
But yeah, so okay, I'm curious, guys. I'm gonna jump over to another topic. Here's something I'm really ignorant about, but I've been hearing about more and more, just due to some podcasts I've been a fan of over the years that have turned into TV shows actually. So years ago, I started following. So I've always been a big Kevin Smith fan, like ever since the early '90s, since since Clerks came out, Mallrats, all that. Huge Kevin Smith fan. And he got into podcasting quite a long time ago, kind of one of the pioneers of podcasting. So his Smodcast network, has grown and grown. And in the early days, I became a big fan of a show called Tell 'em Steve Dave, TESD. And now that podcast, which is essentially a group of guys who worked one guy who worked at his Kevin Smith's comic book shop, The Secret Stash, and some of his friends, it turned into Comic Book Man, which is a unscripted reality show, something like that. Not really a reality show on AMC.
Mhm.
And they talk a lot about cons. Now I know a lot of the guys now, who are on that TV show spend a lot of the times going to Comic Cons, and they travel all around America going to Comic Cons, and they go to Canada and do it too. I've never been to one. This is something that's kind of sounds like it, and from what I'm gathering, it's like a growing culture: con culture, Comic Con culture, anime con culture, cosplay con culture, all these conventions. Could you maybe tell the listeners a little bit about the con culture in America for anime? And I know you guys do take part in them. I've seen on your website that you guys are on panels from time to time. What's up with cons? What is it? What's that all about?
No, I wouldn't necessarily say cons are growing. I'd say cons have grown. I was just in San Diego, and I was talking with some people who work at a media station out there in San Diego, and we were talking about Comic-Con, and they said that every year at this point, Comic-Con has an issue with the fire marshal because every year they break just about every fire code with how many people are packed.
And that's the big one, right? San Diego's the big one, right? That's the mother of all cons.
But Comic-Con is of course on the side of kind of comic books and sci-fi. It's not really representative of anime.
It's not an anime.
Yeah.
So there are big anime cons in the United States. The biggest of which is Anime Expo, which is in California. And then you have like Otakon, which is in Baltimore. It's also very large. Otakon gets up to about 33,000 people, I think.
Oh, wow.
But we're located in Florida. And Florida, for some reason, is just this insanity of conventions. Every city in Florida, I'm not even kidding, has I think at least 2 anime cons.
And Florida has birthed like three of like the top 5 podcasts that still run for anime. It's weird.
It's really strange. And in Orlando, there are, there's a bunch of them. There's AFO, Florida Anime Experience, and there's MegaCon.
MegaCon, Anime Day Orlando.
Anime Day Orlando. I mean, most states don't need to have, you can, their anime cons are very few. Like if you go to Ohio or something, there might be a few. But literally, that's like 4 from Orlando. There's, I think, at least 2 in Tampa. There's a few in Miami. So there's a difference.
How about North Dakota?
Maybe there's...
Or maybe
Dakota Con. I don't know.
There's something though. There's a big con in the Midwest though, and I don't know where it is. Sakura Con is in Washington State, but I feel like there's one in the Midwest area.
Anime Fargo. Welcome to the website for Anime Fargo, North Dakota's
There
premier.
You go. There you go. It is. And I shouldn't have talked about North Dakota in jest. You're a respectable state, a great state, and there's a lot of wonderful people there, and I'm sure many of you are listening. I hope, actually. But wow. So I mean, anime, it's all over the place. But the con culture. I mean, I assume it's just an interesting thing for me. Since I've come to Japan, I mean, it's funny. I mean, there are people who have stereotypes with Japan. And people online contact me all the time. They send me messages on Twitter, or this or that. Have you seen any cosplayers today? Nope.
No.
I normally don't.
Sorry, I wasn't that lucky in walking around Akiba today.
Well,
exactly.
Even in the reason why I brought up the number of conventions there are in America is because that is just one of the many ways that conventions in Japan and America are in no way alike.
Yeah.
First of all, there's maybe a small handful of conventions in Japan. Maybe I only know of about 3. Now they're bigger, they're giant, but there's only a few of them. And at these conventions, you'll generally not find cosplay unless these conventions in Japan normally tend to segregate the cosplayers to a cosplay area where people will come. They'll come with like their suitcases and unload their suitcases and put their costumes on and pose for photographs and things like that in a designated area. But I think that Japan, one, doesn't want people walking around in massive costumes that could clog up the foot traffic. And two, at a convention that has 1 million people, and I don't think they just don't want to bother other people. Some costumes are very scantily clad at times. Can be can be inappropriate at times, and I think that they would prefer just to not have people walking around the convention like that.
And I also think there's an issue, well, not issue, but there's the element of Japanese being, of course, very polite, and I don't think they would want to disturb someone who's walking around enjoying the convention. But if they're in the cosplay area, it's kind of a yes, I want you to take my picture type of thing. There's that permission given.
And I think I could be wrong, but I think that cosplaying on the street in Japan is illegal.
Yeah, I tend to see when I've seen cosplaying, like when I do see cosplay around, it tends to be like in like parks, and there's not like large groups. You'll see like a group of friends, like 3, 4, 5, 6 friends, and they go to a park, a kind of a quiet park, and they've got their suitcases with their costumes. And they all have like amazing cameras.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're just like, like it might be a group of 4 or 5 girls or a couple of guys and some girls. And they're just like, they've got their costumes. And they all have a bunch of great cameras. And they're all just taking pictures of each other and having fun. And yeah, kind of very innocent hobby.
Well, Kevin, maybe your wife has dragged you to Purikura a couple times.
No, she hasn't, but I am familiar with what they are.
You're so lucky.
But
Anyway.
I've had some coworkers who've dragged me to a couple.
At Purikura, which is like the print clubs in Japan, there are these, for people that don't know, they're like intensely advanced photo booths.
You can like manipulate the pictures and add all kinds of things and transform the pictures and make yourself look like basically an anime character.
Yep. They'll expand the size of your eyes and stuff to make you look Western. Well, I've seen a lot of girls that go into these photo booths dressed in cosplay, so I know they do that in various Sega worlds. They're on like the 6th floor. There's a row of photo booths like that, and girls will dress up.
But I think all of the lack of cosplay in Japanese conventions or the difference in cosplay, I think, is for a lot of the reasons we listed. But I also think it's because conventions in America are for the most part for the fans. The big difference is Anime Expo, and that is the industry con for the States.
Yeah.
That is where people go, large companies go as much to interact with fans as to get business done with each other and really talk kind of about the state of the industry in the States. Okay. But a lot of the other conventions are very fan driven. You'll have fan panels, you'll have all of the cosplay, you'll have just a lot of things that are dictated and created for the fans, where in Japan, all of the conventions that I went to in Japan didn't have like any of that. They were for the industry. You could go as a fan and you could enjoy it and see the sights and sounds, but it was very clear that they were there for business, not to cater to the fans.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that doesn't mean that they didn't have awesome booths set up and that like I said, that fans couldn't enjoy it, but it wasn't like in the States where in the States, you'll have huge dealers rooms, buy all your anime goods. You'll have the cosplay everywhere. You'll have dozens of fan panels. Like we'll do panels as you mentioned, and we'll have panels on everything from living in Japan to traveling in Japan to anime you've never seen. And it's a fan culture, but that doesn't really exist in the Japanese cons. A lot of the panels that I saw were few, and they were all like, here's where Toei Animation is going to make announcements about their upcoming projects. And it was very industry focused.
Yeah, I think like cons in America are kind of cut loose, madness, chaos. Those are some words I would use to describe it. I mean,
I really want to experience this. Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of younger people and
It just sounds like really interesting. Like, I don't know. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of an old fart compared to, I'm sure, the average person there. But I mean, it does sound like a really interesting experience.
Well, a good example is cons in America have a rave.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rave at most cons.
Most cons have that.
Yeah,
and
that's a true thing.
People will go in or some equivalent dance party,
as we have in Japan every night.
Yeah,
where I live. Yes,
I've never been to a convention outside of an anime con that's had a dance party. Period. And then specifically anime cons in the States.
Yeah, I mean, I live on Port Island in Kobe, Japan, which is now being touted as the biomedical. What is it? The biomedical research something of Japan, and we have a World Trading Convention Center, and every weekend we have medical conventions, and I can tell by the people I see on the train every day. They're raving.
Yeah, they're ready for the dance party.
They are definitely. Okay, well, okay, guys. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna ask you a question earlier. Speaking of Kobe, have you ever been to Steakland?
Steakland. Is that in a Shotengai?
Is that Shin-Kobe station?
It's Shin-Kobe. You go out on the
Shin-Kobe, the Shinkansen station.
Shinkansen station, Shin-Kobe. You go out on the I'm trying to think. I want to say it's north exit.
Okay.
You make a left and go down the train tracks, and you're gonna go like through this shopping area. It's gonna be like this street with the tracks on the left hand side and stuff under the tracks, and then on the right hand side there'll be like a bunch of stores and stuff. It's called Steakland or Suteki Dando.
Do you mean not Shin-Kobe station but Kobe station? Maybe. Is it in a Shotengai, like a covered arcade?
Yes.
I know what you're talking about.
Is that
I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen the sign. My wife and I have stopped, scratched our heads, looked at it, contemplated going in. Never been in there.
Go in there. Go in there for lunch.
I know. I've seen Steakland. I know what you mean. Never been there.
They have under sanzenen or under 3,000 yen. You can get Kobe-gyu lunch.
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it's good.
And they've been open since like 1910.
Yeah, there's normally a lineup there.
Yeah, you gotta go. The success that I've had is either going right when lunch starts or on
a weekday, maybe, I suppose. Maybe it's it's only weekends when I'm kind of around that town or that area of the town.
Yeah, I know it's rough on weekdays, but you got to figure something out as like a special treat one weekday, because that's one of my favorite restaurants.
Maybe I'll have to call in sick someday.
Yeah.
Wait a second. A few people I work with maybe listen to this. I really was sick. Okay. So you guys have been to Kobe. Nice.
Yeah, I love Kobe. I love the Kobe art museum. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Kobe's a wicked city. I love it. It's small enough to not get claustrophobic. And you've got the mountains and the sea, like literally just a few kilometers apart, and it's big enough to have everything you want. So I totally love living here. I'm curious. You guys, your podcast started in 2009. And I'm gonna say, holy crap. Okay, so I mean, I've been a YouTuber since 2006, and people say to me like, wow, you've been on YouTube for so long. But I mean, now that I've been doing a podcast for more than a year, I tell you, man, there's a butt ton more work involved in doing a podcast than doing just like making a video and throwing it up on YouTube. At least the kind of videos I made in the past. So I realized that like you see a lot of people get into podcasting. They're like, oh, I want a podcast. And they do it. They put out a few episodes and then they disappear. What's kept you guys going for so long?
Yeah, it's true. People don't really realize the amount of work that can go into a podcast.
If you want to make it a good one, right?
Well, I mean, our podcast has gone through a lot of different iterations. At first I did a lot of micro editing of the podcast, and I can tell you right now that nothing will kill a podcast quicker than micro editing it.
Well, I don't. That's something I never do. Like, for example, essentially, unless like there was, because I normally run a clean podcast, unless you said something really offensive, which you haven't.
Sorry.
No, but then I would mark the time signature and something and go in and edit out if like someone dropped like a huge F-bomb or this or that, which I did in a few of the first episodes. And then like I got some complaints and I was like, well, I'd rather have this clean than not. So I just essentially like the interview portion of the show, it's just one take, which makes it much easier.
It's I mean, I know other podcasts that will even do things like editing out non-fluencies in speech.
Yeah.
Like ums and uhs.
Oh God,
and to a trained ear, like to me, I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm so trained, but to someone who's recorded like 600 hours of podcasts, I can tell exactly in your recording where you've edited.
Yeah.
You can tell just from like from even. It's a tip for other podcasts: don't micro edit. And the reason why we've been able to do this for so long is because I feel like we've sort of mastered the process of preparation and the process of having a format.
Okay.
And our podcast outlines can be up to 8 pages long.
Oh wow.
But we've sort of mastered the process of doing it.
It's almost like fill in the blank at this point.
It's there's a system. We have sort of a system that allows us to update fresh content really quickly.
Okay.
And I think if you don't count like the anime watching,
yeah,
I'd say the total weekly effort is probably 6 hours.
Well, I mean, I completely understand. I mean, this is episode 59, and I've just gotten better at. I mean, I've got a long way to go. I would like. I know I will get better and better. It's practice, though, right? As you do it, the more you do it, the better you get.
Right. And I would say when we started broadcasting live, because we do a live broadcast now on YouTube every week, and then the episode gets put up later on iTunes with whatever, again, kind of what you were saying, a couple minor edits if I'm dumb and smash my face into the mic or something like that. Mitsuki will edit that out.
Yeah.
But when we started broadcasting live, it really helped with non-fluencies. And of course, I just said so you can see we're not perfect, but with practice, you get to that place where you're more comfortable speaking, you're more comfortable pausing and letting yourself think for a second, which is big.
And I gotta say, Kevin, I gotta hand it to you because I have done a few podcasts on my own.
Oh yeah,
but it's extremely difficult to do a podcast by yourself.
Well, but to be honest, though, I don't really consider it a podcast by myself in a way because, I mean, I really think there's, from what I gather, from what I've heard from other podcasters and people I've talked to, there's really 2 models that kind of work. One, you need a co-host, or 2, you bring a guest on every week.
Yeah.
And I've always, so the way I have kind of a system too, I kind of have like a formula where I have an intro. I kind of welcome people to the podcast. Then I have a section where I might talk about a little bit about news about myself or what I'm doing or dealing with or something. Then I have the interview, and then I just kind of have an outro. So the show is really geared towards not so much it's not geared towards myself. It's about the topic and the guest, and because it's for example, like last week, let's see, like I'm saying last week. Now all of a sudden I'm brain farting. Who the heck did I have on last week? Last week's episode, Kevin. Oh my gosh! And now I'm gonna leave this in. I did an episode recently about just a teacher who was working in a very stable job. He had a really good position actually as an ALT, but he was working for a board of education, a direct hire ALT. And he quit his job to start up his own school. So
cool.
We talked about making the plunge to start up your own school. I did an interview with a guy who was an ALT, who is now a professional photographer and owns a big photography studio based out of Japan. He travels around the world doing the photography thing. I've done interviews. I did an interview with a guy who skateboarded across Japan. Another guy who cycled across Japan. I did one with a guy who's basically like a CSI agent in Los Angeles who now teaches forensic pathology at a university here in Japan. So it's focused mostly, it's on them. I guess that's why it makes it easier for me. But I guess at the same time, where the difficulties come is some people are very willing to talk and open to talk and share their stories. Other people, it takes a bit more work to get the story out of them.
Yeah,
Right.
and I would definitely say that if you're thinking of going into podcasting, being comfortable with speaking, or at least being committed to becoming comfortable
Yeah.
with speaking,
It
is a huge
helps.
one.
So like for us, we tend to have 3 people per
Yeah.
show, 3 hosts. But I mean, I kind of attribute our continued longevity to our chemistry. All the hosts have always either been really close friends, or my brother has also been involved in the podcast.
Okay.
And I think we've been lucky sort of being able to rotate hosts because, you know, when you've been doing this for going on 6 years, which is kind of crazy, you know, you lose people.
Yeah.
So so right now we currently have 3 hosts and 1 frequent guest, and then but we also have 4 retired hosts. So we've been through quite a few people. So
And maybe one of those retired hosts may someday come back, maybe they won't, but
right.
but as Mitsugi was saying, having that chemistry and everyone kind of being on board with what the mission of the show is, I think really helps, because you know, we started doing this, as Mitsugi said at the start, we started doing it to make a community and to talk about something that we loved, and that really was the motivation behind it, and it still is. I mean, as it's grown, we've gotten a sponsor or whatever, and that's awesome because now we're not paying our own hosting fees. So but it really is a labor of love, and I'll see people go into podcasting, and I've actually had the question of, okay, how do I make money off of it? And I'm like, if you're going into this with the plan of making money off of it, with the plan of sustaining off of it, not even just making money, but sustaining yourself, you're in for a bumpy ride on that one.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's impossible. There are tons of podcasters who do it, and more kudos to them. And I think, you know, it's good to get kind of what's owed in a way, but at the same time, it's like you got to go into it with your heart first I think with podcasting.
Absolutely. I give that same advice to people on YouTube as well, because I have friends who I started with on YouTube back in the day who are now doing it professionally. They make a ton of money. And others who haven't. Others who are still quote unquote journeymen. But at the same time, the people who you meet who go into it, because once the partnership program came in years ago and people could start making Google ads and some money, there were people who were like, I'm going to go into YouTube and I'm going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Those people, they were flashes in the pan. They didn't last, or not even so. That kind of alludes that they were something special. They just weren't around very long.
Yeah.
You gotta get into it for the long haul, but I mean, you do it because you love it, I suppose, and that shows through, right?
Yeah. I think the love translates to the people can tell, you know, when you have that passion.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I'm going from as a YouTuber, I made money. At some points, I made some quite good money. And now I've basically put most of my energy into podcasting because this really makes me happy. And then when I say a lot of money, I'm talking like, buy a 6-pack of beer on the weekend kind of money. I'm not talking about paying the rent money. Not that kind of money.
And that was my qualifier too, is you can make some money, but oftentimes you're like, oh yeah, I can pay my host month and maybe give away an extra prize or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Or I can go out and have exactly. And I can go to Starbucks and buy a couple of extra coffees that I normally would be able to do or something like that. But okay. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but I'm curious. You guys, I would say recently when I heard you both interviewed on the G Pod with Anthony Joe of Gaijin Pod.
Great guy.
Yeah, Anthony is a great guy, and I love Anthony. And I love Gaijin Pot because Gaijin Pot does actually, the Gaijin Pot blog features the Just Japan podcast several times a month. Yay! So thank you, Gaijin Pot blog. The Just Japan podcast is featured there a few times a month in the blog, which definitely helps us a lot. Getting a lot more awesome listeners involved and whatnot. And Anthony's actually, he was a guest on an earlier episode where I interviewed him about the G Pod. So he's a great dude. But when I listened to the interview on the G Pod, And by the way, everyone, I'll put a link to the G Pod in the show notes at busanonkevin.com. You guys were both in Japan.
Yep.
And now you're not.
That's
Yep.
true.
So,
We're not.
what happened there? I know you moved, but so you guys came to Japan. Can you, in a nutshell, tell us about your little, your Japan experience?
Well, it begins with selling everything.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I
Wow.
basically sold everything that I had. Everything. I sold my car. I sold.
Condense life down into
Yeah.
about 4 suitcases.
Yeah, the whole everything, and you go to Japan, and we got jobs in Eikaiwa up in Ibaraki,
okay.
and Ibaraki is a nice place. I mean, it's
Quiet,
urban
huh?
enough because you're close to Tokyo, but it's rural enough that you have the charm of rural life too.
We lived very close to the Jobansen, the Joban train line. So it was a 40-minute straight shot into Ueno.
Right.
Oh
So-
wow. Well, that's pretty easy then. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not so bad. Yeah, life in Japan was really great. Sometimes I miss various aspects of Japan. My favorite thing in Japan, flat out, is onsen, without a doubt.
Love onsen.
If I could, I would. If I had an onsen that was just like the one near my house in Ibaraki, I would go every weekend. But
Mm.
fortunately, the American culture doesn't really allow for you getting totally naked with a bunch of people.
Yeah, that's a shame actually, because I understand onsen culture is awesome. Yeah.
And you're fairly close to Osaka,
Mhm.
right? So you should go to Spa World, Osaka.
Yeah, my
'Cause
my wife actually worked there when she was younger.
Really?
She was
Oh
in
my
her early 20s. She worked at Spa World. She said, "Yeah, I know Spa World. I know that's in Tennoji. Yeah, in Osaka.
It's the best place ever.
Pretty impressive. It's like the naked hot bath Disney World of Japan.
It
Yep,
really
it
is. That's a perfect way to
Mhm.
describe it.
Yeah.
And in Ibaraki, I was really lucky. I lived in a full-size Japanese house. It
Oh,
was
wow.
huge. I mean, people always make jokes about, oh, you're living in Japan. You must live in like a place that's the size of my closet.
It's like 2.5 times the size of of your apartment now.
Yeah, my apartment now is less than what my house in Japan was like. I mean, it was like SLDK.
Wow.
So and the rent was cheap. So life in Ibaraki was really great, and I worked in an Eikaiwa for a year, and then I switched over and started working for one of the largest ALT companies in Japan, and
Okay.
you may be able to guess who that is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll just
and,
leave it at that.
But my but I never really planned on making it into a career, and especially with the way that the exchange rate was shifting, I thought that it was time to just sort of come back and start doing what I had done before. And what I did before I went to Japan was I was a research analyst. So
Very
Oh.
similarly, I went over there and I started out as a Kaiwa, and then I actually moved into an international school. I taught second grade American curriculum,
Oh, nice.
and that was a lot of fun. But I never had a goal of being a teacher. And I love education. There's nothing wrong with people who are teachers.
yeah, I miss the little kids.
and,
they were nice.
My mom started out as an elementary school teacher, so it's near and dear to my heart, and I'm glad I had the experience. But I have a master's in business, and my love is in marketing and international business and things like that. And my Japanese just isn't up to scratch. I'm not N2 or N1, and
Right.
I can't get a job in the field that I really want to work in because my Japanese isn't there. So it only made sense to stay just shy of 2 years and come back, because I felt like if I stayed much longer than that, potential employers would look at my resume and go, "You haven't worked in the States in 3 years. Nothing you have is relevant anymore."
No, absolutely makes sense. Yeah. No. For example, someone like myself, I am a licensed teacher in Canada. I'm a K through 6, and I taught in Canada before I came here, in public schools, and so I teach now. I teach at an international school, so I'm doing what I'm doing what I do. You know, and will I be moving back home? Yeah, probably. Actually, that's kind of my family. We're planning on that in not the near future, but the next few years. That's the goal. But you know, it's the one thing I always we've talked about in previous episodes of this podcast. Teaching is a great means to get to Japan, and it's a great way to experience Japan. And it's definitely not for everyone, but it's a great way to get there. And for some people, it's a great way to get a visa. Because there's a lot of people I've interviewed on this podcast in the past who want to come to Japan. They had a business idea or they wanted to do this or that. And coming here was, as a teacher, allowed them to get the visa and allowed them to get the time to get their feet on the ground and kind of explore the country and really kind of survey their options.
And that's we've talked about that a lot on our show too, is how once you're in the country, it's way easier to have doors open to you.
Oh, absolutely.
No matter what your visa says, it's way easier to find opportunity once you're physically there.
Yeah, because once you're here, then you can find an opportunity and change that visa. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you know what, guys? I don't want to keep you much longer. It's getting pretty late here in Japan land. I'm wondering, so could you share with the Just Japan podcast listeners, where can they find you guys online?
You can find us at our main page, aaapodcast.com. And you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Stitcher. I think we're on that app, and probably a bunch of other third-party podcast apps that our listeners have put us into over the years.
That you're not familiar with. I've been hearing that a lot recently myself. My people are people are like, Kevin, we download you from here and here and here. I'm like, oh.
Yeah,
scratch his head.
We had someone say once, like, "Oh, I submitted your RSS feed to this. I hope it's okay." And we're like, "Yeah, go for it."
Well, more people hear it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
If you want to tweet us, you can tweet us at AAA Podcast, and we're live on YouTube on Sundays at 4 p.m. EST. So that's 5 a.m. JST, but 4 p.m. EST on YouTube. So,
and of course, all of our old YouTube live recordings are up on YouTube. So if you'd rather see our faces, I was about to say beautiful, but then edited myself, see our faces, you can see that on our YouTube channel.
You are attractive people. I've watched your videos.
Oh, thank you.
Guys, it's good stuff. No, I've watched a few of your live casts, your hangouts. Good stuff, guys. It's definitely worth watching. Everyone out there interested in Japan stuff, anime stuff, I recommend. And for those of you who maybe you didn't catch all those links, go to the show notes at boostonkevin.com. All the links are there. It's all cool. Everything will be there for this episode. So guys, thank you so much for doing this week. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Kevin, and feel free to use us as a resource whenever you need. So.
Oh, absolutely. By the way, I just actually remembered before I sign out, you guys are also nominated for a 2015 Podcast Award.
We were, yes.
So, you guys are up against This American Life.
Yep, just like last year.
So, good luck.
Thank you very much.
I'm up against the Amateur Traveler podcast. This podcast is in the travel section, and I mean I don't know what the exact analytics are for the Amateur podcast, the Amateur Traveler podcast, but I know that I've got 3,300 Twitter followers, and he's got something like 25,000. So
that means nothing.
That means nothing, right?
Throw it out.
We know that feeling.
Yeah.
It's like, yay, vote for us, even though we're up against NPR.
Well, then again, I actually, I can't even compare that. Oh, but nonetheless, you guys will get it. You will.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you too.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And take care, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Take
Talk
care.
to you again.